And then finally, you're in the room, and in comes the doctor. Hello, how are you? And shakes your hand and asks you how you're doing, and asks you some questions, and maybe takes a look at areas. Depending on if you have something pressing or if you're just there for a checkup. But you maybe get 7 minutes. You maybe get 10 minutes. At most, maybe 15 minutes of the doctor's time. In a holistic approach that everything going on in your life affects your health, it's hard to have those kinds of conversations when you have a doctor that is rushed. And it's not the doctor's fault, per se. It's just the way that the system works now. There also are less general practitioners out there. The reason being is that, for doctors to make better money, being a specialist is sort of essential now. Being a general practitioner, when you've got stacks and stacks of student loan bills from med school that you've got to pay off, that can be challenging. It doesn't pay what other types of positions do pay in the medical field. So we have seen a decrease in general practitioners over the years, and that's not a situation, from what I understand, that's changing for the better. And certainly the confusion that is being kicked up now around Medicaid and Medicare and insurance companies in general, that's certainly not going to help the situation either. So it becomes increasingly important for us to be self-aware about health and understand and maybe change what our beliefs are around self-healing. That it actually can happen, and that it actually does happen. And in fact, most healing that happens, even with medications, happen via your own amazing body, which we have created to do those things. And medicine, at its best, helps support that. Medicine, at its worst, blocks it from happening. Maybe alleviates some symptoms, but doesn't get to the heart of, or the truth of what your body is manifesting and why it might be manifesting that. And if you believe, as I do, that we are, creating these things, then we're also creating these situations in which our body responds in certain ways. And again, it's all part of our process of expanding and becoming more aware and connecting with the highest levels of ourselves. So we talked about the self-healing process, and basically what kicks self-healing into action is getting to the relaxation state. And we talked about meditation as a way of getting to the relaxation state. That's the first part of it, really. But then there's, subsequent supportive things that you do in your own environment, which include, bringing, having time to bring in joy into your life, to focus on the things that give you that feeling of happiness, to find balance, in your life between, when you're working and you're not able to really think about the healthy things you need to do for yourself. It happens to all of us. But then going back and sort of countering that with uh, self-care, intense self-care. And the more we learn to do that, well, I think the healthier we're going to be. So, the state of your mind, as we've said many times, is what is really crucial in our health, and plays more of an important part, I think, than the actual health of our bodies often. Now, of course, granted, there are things that you may have in your body, uh, you know, uh, molecular chromosome issues, uh, but much of it is affected by the mind, and that means that you can, given the right focus and the right uh, approach, access healing via the mind. Uh, but to achieve that, again, we need to be in a state of relaxation. So I'm going to talk about one of the things that may keep us from reaching that state. Mental health issues, particularly depression and anxiety, are at epidemic levels in this country. Just from personal experiences, I've had experiences with anxiety, and I'm thankful that they haven't been, and some depression too, and I'm thankful that they haven't been as debilitating as many others have experienced. I'm thankful that they have not been as intense. But I have family and friends, many of whom are going through or have gone through, states of depression and other forms of mental illness, including anxiety. It's so common now, and people are becoming more aware of it. And as we become aware of it, we start to understand there's an epidemic going on here, and something has to change in order for this epidemic to stop. Now, one of the problems now with mental health treatments, and I noticed this happening somewhere in the 90s, and I was completely surprised by it because the reason I was exposed to it was because of a family member who was going through mental health issues, and the doctors that were treating her, brought family in so that they would understand what was going on. And it surprised me because up until that point, my understanding of mental health issues were that you used a lot of talk therapy, maybe some medication, but mostly talk therapy, to get to the bottom of what might be going on. But somewhere in the 90s, it changed, and the model became the see them in magazines. You can see them sometimes. They're on television as well. And their claims, would lead you to believe that, emotional health should be, zooming, because these medications ought to be completely annihilating conditions like depression and anxiety. But they're not. And a lot of these medications fall short of what they promise. And many times, people who are going through severe bouts of depression or anxiety have to go through numerous medications, and a right balance of medications has to be found that works for them. So these medications, they're called psychotropic, and they affect mood, they affect the emotions, and they affect the behavior. So, and most of these psychotropic medications are antidepressants. But there are also antipsychotic drugs and anti-anxiety agents. And they're used to treat depression and anxiety, and other kinds of conditions that include abnormalities of thought and mood and behavior, personality disorders, and so forth. And sometimes these situations can last for a few months, but they can also be long-term. Some can even be lifelong. And so often the treatments are that long as well. The problem with these psychotropic medications is that they can have really horrible adverse drug reactions. And I'm looking at a statistic here that's saying that 48% of the severe adverse drug reactions that affect millions of people in the United States are caused by psychotropic medications. And that's because they are really powerful. And the other statistic I'm looking at here is that adverse reactions to drugs are the fourth leading cause of death in our country. And I mean, we've certainly talked about the opioid crisis we're in, which stems from the same problem of over-medication and or easier access to these kinds of drugs. So we're going to talk about some of these. We're running short of time, so we'll probably wait until part 2. But let's get to antidepressants. Another statistic here I'm looking at: 9% of American adults suffer from depression. I think it's more than that. Honestly, I really think it's more than that. I think 9% of adults maybe have been diagnosed with depression. But there's a whole host of other people, I think, that suffer from it, and it hasn't been adequately diagnosed. But anyway, 3% of adults have major depressive disorder, which is a long-lasting and severe form, and is the leading cause of disability for Americans between the age of 15 and 44. The leading cause of disability. That's an amazing statistic. So antidepressants are supposed to improve the symptoms of depression by impacting those brain chemicals that I told you about that are thought to be out of balance. So such brain chemicals as serotonin and dopamine, those are the chemicals associated with emotions. Are affected by these drugs. So we have what they call SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and SNRIs,